Have you ever wondered what would happen if a single country's policy decision could send shockwaves through the entire global economy? Well, we might be about to find out. Picture this. It's 2026, and China announces a major restriction on its silver exports. This isn't just a small policy tweak, it's an economic earthquake, and the tremors are felt everywhere. So, why is this such a big deal? First, let's understand the policy. The Chinese government, citing the need to secure strategic reserves for its own high-tech and green energy industries, decides to drastically cut the amount of silver it sells to the rest of the world. This isn't a total ban, but the quotas are so low they might as well be. China is a powerhouse in silver production and refining, so when they turn off the tap, the world gets very, very thirsty. The immediate impact is chaos. The price of silver doesn't just climb, it skyrockets overnight. We're talking about a historic surge that makes previous market volatility look like a calm day. Industries that rely heavily on silver are the first to feel the pain. Think about electronics, your smartphone, your laptop, the massive servers that power the internet. All of them need silver for its incredible conductivity. Solar panel manufacturers, who need silver paste for their photovoltaic cells, suddenly see their production costs explode. The electric vehicle industry, already hungry for resources, faces yet another critical shortage. The ripple effect spreads with terrifying speed. Companies can't get the silver they need, so production lines grind to a halt. This isn't just a problem for a few factories. It's a systemic breakdown of entire supply chains. A car company in Germany might have to stop production because a tiny electronic component made in Malaysia with silver refined in China is suddenly unavailable. The cost of everything from medical equipment to home appliances begins to rise, fueling a new wave of global inflation that central banks struggle to control. Now, let's look at the financial markets. The silver squeeze triggers a panic. Traders who bet against a rise in silver prices are wiped out. The extreme volatility spills over into other commodity markets, then into stocks and bonds. We see a massive flight to safety, but with traditional assets shaken, investors are scrambling. Financial institutions with heavy exposure to industrial companies or commodity markets face immense pressure, and whispers of bailouts and systemic risk start to get louder. It's a perfect storm of industrial paralysis and financial panic. So, what happens in the long run? The world is forced to adapt, and fast. The first response is a frantic global rush to find new sources of silver. Mining companies in Mexico, Peru, and Australia ramp up exploration and production, but opening new mines takes years. It's not a quick fix. Recycling becomes a national priority. Governments launch massive campaigns to recover silver from old electronics and industrial waste. It's an urban mining boom, but it can only supplement, not replace, new production. The real long-term shift is in innovation. The crisis becomes a powerful catalyst for change. Scientists and engineers work around the clock to find silver alternatives. We see breakthroughs in conductive materials using graphene, copper nanowires, and new polymer composites. Industries that were once completely dependent on silver are forced to re-engineer their products. Some of these new technologies turn out to be even better or cheaper, permanently altering the technological landscape. This crisis also redraws the map of global trade. Countries realize the danger of relying so heavily on a single source for a critical material. New strategic alliances are formed focused on resource security. We see the rise of friendshoring, where countries prioritize trade with geopolitical allies, even if it's more expensive. The era of purely cost-driven globalization gives way to a new era of resilience-driven globalization. The 2026 silver shock serves as a brutal wake-up call. It demonstrates how interconnected and fragile our global systems are. While the initial crisis is painful, it forces the world to become more resilient, innovative, and strategically aware, reshaping our economy and technology for decades to come. Thanks for watching. If you found this look into our potential future interesting, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. See you next time. Welcome. Today, we uncover a critical issue impacting global industries and finance, the escalating silver supply crisis. Across major markets like COMEX, LBMA, and Shanghai, silver inventories are plummeting at an alarming rate. Since 2020, we've witnessed dramatic declines, signaling a profound shift in this vital commodity's availability. The physical market is under immense pressure. Vaults once brimming with silver are now alarmingly empty. Reports indicate accessible silver reserves in key industrial hubs could last merely 30 to 45 days. This scarcity is creating a significant divergence between paper-traded silver and the actual physical metal. Observe these charts. The price gap is widening, reflecting a market in disarray. Industries are now facing unprecedented challenges. Factories, once bustling, are showing signs of distress. Companies like Jinko Solar, Nvidia, and Samsung are grappling with the immediate consequences of this shortage. Solar panel production lines are stalling, and the cost of silver paste has tripled, creating immense pressure. Executives are holding urgent crisis meetings, desperately seeking solutions to maintain operations. Companies are bypassing traditional procurement, buying directly from the Shanghai Gold Exchange at exorbitant costs. This leads to circuitous shipping routes and urgent air freight, adding further strain and expense to supply chains. The banking system is also feeling the heat. We see visuals of stressed financial documents and worried bankers. The property sector collapse in China is intersecting with this crisis, creating a flight to physical silver. This has driven a significant $10 to $15 premium in Shanghai, reflecting intense demand for tangible assets. Banks are facing margin calls and collateral issues, amplifying the systemic risk. A visual metaphor of dominoes falling illustrates the interconnectedness of these financial pressures. This crisis exposes a critical vulnerability in global supply chains, particularly China's dominance in silver refining. Western reliance on Chinese refining developed over decades, influenced by past policy decisions. Now, we see stalled solar and chip production in Europe and the USA, a direct consequence of this reliance. The silver crisis signifies a breakdown of normal market mechanisms and permanent changes in strategic material procurement. There's an urgent need for new supply chain strategies to mitigate these vulnerabilities. This crisis is a stark reminder of our strategic vulnerabilities in global industry. Stay informed, stay aware. But solar is just the visible tip of the dependency iceberg. Electronics manufacturing, automotive production, medical devices, and defense systems all depend on silver components that require refined silver from Chinese facilities. When China restricts refined silver exports, they don't just affect silver markets, they affect every industry that depends on silver's unique properties for critical applications. The strategic weaponization, China's silver export restrictions represent sophisticated economic warfare that uses resource control to achieve geopolitical objectives without direct military confrontation. This move mirrors China's historical tactics with rare earth materials, where it leveraged market dominance to exert geopolitical influence. By controlling 60 to 70% of global silver supply through refining bottlenecks, China can influence industrial production in countries that have become strategically dependent on Chinese refined materials. The dual-use classification allows China to restrict silver exports for national security reasons while maintaining plausible deniability about economic warfare intentions. This weaponization strategy is particularly effective because silver is embedded in technologies essential for military, communications, and energy infrastructure that Western countries cannot substitute quickly. The monetary dimension beyond industrial applications, China's silver restrictions serve monetary objectives related to currency competition and reserve asset diversification that threaten Western financial system dominance. Silver is increasingly discussed as a potential foundational asset in a future BRICS Plus monetary system that would compete with dollar-dominated international trade. By accumulating silver domestically while restricting exports, China creates conditions for silver to function as monetary metal in international trade arrangements that bypass dollar clearing systems. Emerging market central banks may have acquired several hundred million ounces of silver via routes that bypass traditional market mechanisms. This monetary strategy aligns with broader Chinese objectives to reduce global dependence on dollar-denominated trade and create alternative reserve assets that cannot be frozen or sanctioned by Western authorities. The technology war implications, China's silver restrictions, create technological dependencies that extend far beyond current industrial applications into future technology development, where silver's properties become even more critical. The AI boom has created new demand categories for silver in data center components, quantum computing applications, and advanced semiconductor manufacturing that cannot use substitute materials. By controlling silver supply during the early phases of AI infrastructure development, China can influence which countries and companies have access to materials essential for advanced technology development. This technological leverage becomes more valuable over time as AI and quantum technologies become more important for economic competitiveness and national security. China's silver strategy positions them to control access to materials essential for technologies that will determine global power relationships for decades. The environmental leverage. Silver's role in renewable energy technology gives China environmental leverage over countries committed to carbon reduction and green energy transitions. Solar panel manufacturing requires silver for electrical connections that maximize energy conversion efficiency. No substitute materials achieve similar performance levels. By restricting silver exports, China can slow renewable energy deployment in competitor countries while maintaining their own domestic green energy development. This environmental leverage aligns with broader Chinese strategies to dominate renewable energy supply chains and become the essential provider for global decarbonization efforts. Countries committed to aggressive carbon reduction targets become strategically dependent on Chinese silver access for their environmental objectives. The Western response failures. Western governments' responses to China is silver crisis reveal fundamental misunderstanding of resource dependencies and strategic vulnerabilities that decades of globalization created. The regulatory implications are already rippling through Washington and Brussels. Lawmakers are facing mounting pressure to fast-track permits for domestic mining projects and to provide subsidies for silver recycling technologies. But domestic mining and recycling cannot replace Chinese refining capacity quickly enough to address immediate supply shortages affecting critical industries. Western strategic reserve policies focused on oil and food supplies while ignoring mineral dependencies that modern technology requires for basic functionality. The speed and severity of China's silver crisis caught Western policymakers unprepared because they never developed comprehensive strategies for resource supply chain resilience, the market structure transformation. China's silver restrictions are creating permanent changes in how global commodity markets function when geopolitical considerations become primary factors in resource allocation. Once physical delivery becomes the benchmark for price discovery, the traditional futures exchanges like COMEX may lose control of global pricing altogether, similar to what happened in lithium and rare earth markets when physical shortages emerged. This represents transition from market-based price discovery to geopolitical resource allocation, where access depends on political relationships rather than economic considerations. The paper silver market is becoming increasingly irrelevant as physical scarcity makes derivative contracts worthless for users who need actual metal for industrial applications. This transformation affects all strategic materials markets as governments recognize that resource control provides more leverage than military or financial power in an interconnected global economy. The timeline acceleration. What makes China's silver crisis particularly dangerous is the accelerating timeline where multiple stress factors converge simultaneously to overwhelm adaptive capacity. The surge to $90 Oz is not merely a reaction to a single policy change, but the culmination of a decade-long structural imbalance. For the fifth consecutive year, the global silver market has entered 2026 in a massive supply deficit. According to the Silver Institute, the cumulative shortfall since 2021 has now exceeded 900 million ounces, nearly a full year's worth of global mine production. China's export restrictions converted existing structural deficits into acute supply crisis that industrial users cannot address through normal procurement adjustments. The timeline for developing alternative supply sources extends over decades, while the timeline for industrial supply disruption extends over weeks or months. The industrial cascade effects. China's silver crisis creates cascade effects that spread through interconnected industrial systems in ways that amplify initial supply disruptions. Electronics manufacturing delays affect automotive production. Solar panel shortages affect renewable energy deployment. Medical device constraints affect healthcare systems. Each affected industry represents inputs for other industries, creating multiplicative effects where initial silver shortage becomes broader industrial paralysis. The interconnectedness of modern industrial systems means that strategic material shortages can trigger breakdown across multiple sectors simultaneously. This cascade potential explains why China's silver restrictions represent economic warfare capability that can affect Western industrial capacity without direct military confrontation. The investment implications. Understanding. China's silver crisis reveals investment implications that extend far beyond precious metals into industrial resilience and strategic resource security. Did you know that long before the US dollar became the world's currency, another shiny metal held the global economy in its grip? We're talking about silver. And for centuries, one empire's insatiable hunger for it shaped the destinies of nations, China. This isn't just a story about old coins, it's a tale of trade, empires, and a global currency crisis that has echoes in our world today. How did China's love for silver create the first truly globalized economy? And how did its eventual collapse send shockwaves from Madrid to Manila? Let's dive in. For hundreds of years, during the Ming and Qing dynasties, China operated on a silver standard. Everything from a farmer's taxes to a merchant's grandest ventures was paid for in silver. There was just one problem. China didn't have many silver mines. This created a massive countrywide demand for a metal they couldn't produce themselves. It was like an entire continent needing a resource that only existed on the other side of the planet. This imbalance turned China into a global economic vacuum cleaner, sucking in silver from all corners of the earth. So, where did all this silver come from? Enter the Spanish Empire. In the 16th century, Spanish conquistadors stumbled upon colossal silver deposits in the Americas, particularly at Potosí in modern-day Bolivia and Zacatecas in Mexico. These mines were so rich they fundamentally changed the world. A sophisticated global trade route quickly formed. The Spanish would mine the silver, mint it into coins like the famous pieces of 8, and ship it across the Atlantic to Spain. From there, European merchants, the Dutch, the Portuguese, and later the British, would buy this silver. Why? Because it was the only thing China truly wanted in exchange for its coveted goods: silk, porcelain, and tea. This created the first real global trade triangle. Silver from the Americas flowed to Europe, then eastward to China. Chinese goods flowed back to Europe, where they were in high demand. A crucial part of this network was the Manila galleon trade route. Spanish galleons would sail directly from Acapulco in Mexico, loaded with American silver across the Pacific to Manila in the Philippines. In Manila, they would trade that silver with Chinese merchants who had sailed south, eager to get their hands on it. For over 250 years, this Pacific route was a silver superhighway, directly linking the New World with the Far East. The system made the world go round. The Spanish Empire was funded by it. European nations grew rich as middlemen, and China's massive economy was lubricated by this constant inflow of foreign silver. The Piece of Eight became the world's first global currency, accepted everywhere from Boston to Beijing. It was the US dollar of its time. But what happens when the supply of that global currency suddenly dries up? In the early 19th century, the system began to crumble. The Latin American Wars of Independence disrupted Spanish control over the silver mines. Production plummeted. Suddenly, the steady river of silver flowing into China slowed to a trickle. This was a catastrophic shock to the Chinese economy. The value of silver within China skyrocketed. Remember, taxes were paid in silver. For the average farmer who earned their living in copper coins, this was a disaster. Imagine your rent is due in a currency that suddenly becomes 10 times more expensive. You'd be wiped out. This silver crisis caused widespread economic hardship, peasant uprisings, and severely weakened the Qing dynasty from within. Just as China was reeling from this internal crisis, an external one hit with full force: the Opium Wars. British merchants, desperate to reverse their trade deficit with China, began illegally flooding the country with opium from India. They demanded payment in silver. This not only created a massive social crisis, but also caused a massive outflow of the very silver China so desperately needed. The government's attempts to stop this trade led directly to the Opium Wars with Britain. Weakened by the silver crisis and defeated in the wars, China was forced to sign unequal treaties, cede territory like Hong Kong, and open its doors to foreign powers on unfavorable terms. The century of humiliation had begun, and its roots lay deep in this global monetary shift. The silver standard that had built China's economic might for centuries had become its Achilles heel. So what's the big takeaway from all this? And this story shows how interconnected the world has been for centuries. A revolution in Mexico could cause a farmer in rural China to lose his land. It's a powerful reminder that currency and geopolitics are two sides of the same coin. The rise and fall of silver as the world's reserve currency mirrors the rise and fall of empires. Today, we talk about the US dollar's dominance and the potential rise of other currencies. We see trade disputes and shifts in global supply chains. The story of China's silver crisis isn't just ancient history. It's a case study in what happens when the foundations of the global financial system crack. It shows how quickly a nation's fortunes can change when the flow of money is disrupted. Understanding this past helps us better understand the economic power plays happening right now on a global stage. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey through economic history fascinating, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the forces that shape our world. See you next time.